Of course, I wanted to bring you two together. So I'll start with the easy question, just for both of you, kind of sharing in this moment, the historic moment right now, to have two African American leaders at BC making history. What does that mean to the two of you, and what were those initial conversations between the two of you?
You want to start, Todd?
Sure. I will say for me, coming in, I had, Reggie and I had several mutual friends, and there were several that had hit me up and saying, hey, you got to connect with Reggie and all this other stuff. So I was excited knowing that, for selfish reasons, that he's a football guy, and then after learning a little bit more, his leadership, and all the characteristics that he brought. So I was really leaning on him for a number of things, just in general. And so now that we have the opportunity to work together, and really he's my boss. And so I want to do things to ensure that he's successful, and he and I have talked about that, privately as well. But it's so cool because as we're developing our friendship and our relationship, professionally as well as personally, it's just so cool to work side by side, because he understands right now, having been in the coaching world, exactly what I'm going through. I understand what he's going through. We can both bounce ideas off of one another to ensure that, obviously that we're working together, because we understand how monumental, I guess, to some degree this is.
Mm-hmm. I would totally agree. It's such a moment. It's a great moment in time, special moment in time. And I think, Kari, we talked about this, last night, and the fact that in this county, in Bakersfield, there hasn't been something like this. And so I think us, and again, being two African-American males, being at Bakersfield College, which I consider, the number one college in the city of Bakersfield, and us being the leaders on moving in that direction under our Dr. Christian's vision, I just think it's a special moment. And the fact that, Todd's local, he went to school here, he played at BC, a lot of people know him, and we have a lot, and the same thing. I came here as a coach, football coach, got to know a lot of great people in this community. And I think the community has a lot of energy and supports us both in our current roles. And so I think that's why it's special, is that we're leading the charge on moving in the direction where equity and racial equality is being seen right now, currently.
Yeah, and with that all said, what do you both hope that your presence does for those kind of issues, for inequality, for racial injustice, and again, the division that we do kind of see here in Bakersfield? Do you kind of hope that you two together can maybe bring this whole place together? I know those are some big shoes to fill, but I'm curious if that's something that you kind of hope, or what are those expectations for you each?
Well, from my standpoint, I think it's big, because I think it will bring the community together. Because I think there's a misconception that, and again, we talked about this, is that we were only supported just by African Americans. We were supported by a lot of people in this community in these roles. And so it wasn't just about African Americans, it's about us as men and as people. And there's a lot of individuals in this community that saw us as leaders in these roles and supported us being in these roles. So I think that's the one thing that's important about it. It will bring us all together, because it wasn't just African Americans supporting us. It was everybody supporting us, all nationalities. It didn't matter. And so Todd came highly recommended. I have a lot of people that supported me being in this role. And I think that in itself shows the direction this community is moving in.
And I agree 100%, because, we're both qualified. We both have a lot of experience. I think just our personalities, we want to do what's right for the student athletes, regardless of, who they are, where they come from. And that's what leadership is about. It is diving into some of the tough conversations. It is, proposing and opening up people's ideas and thoughts about different things. And at the same time, being in a competitive world. I mean, we're both competitive. We want to do it because we want to do it, regardless of what other people think or say, or, because we understand, just the overall environment from an athletics program. And especially when you can get that going, it really now starts to bring out the attention, the interest into schools. Because, if you look nationwide, when football programs specifically are successful, the enrollment goes up. It just increases the excitement and the exposure. So I think there are some other things that sometimes people don't see behind the scenes that we're working very hard for too. And, and I was a part of those years when I saw the stadium filled. And so selfishly, I think I can do that because, as Reggie mentioned, we feel like we're going to bring in a whole new group of people as well with the new excitement of coming. And some of them might come just to see us fail. I mean, you never know,
Right.
but nevertheless, they're in the stands and they're supporting. And so I'm very mindful of presenting and putting on a great product so that they'll continue to come back, because ultimately they're still going to support the student athletes overall. They're going to, again, think less of me because I'm never playing again, and they're going to see more of the student athletes.
Awesome. Well, with that said, I know I asked both of you this, but with both of you here, you know the importance for the younger Black athletes to see coaches who look like them. And not only are they getting to see a head football coach, but they're also getting to see the athletic director who looks like them as well. So with that said, how much does that play into your mind of what you're trying to do for these younger people just to see this inclusion and diversity at your school?
Well, it's important to me because, from my aspect, it tells our students how, if they get it done in the classroom, if they're successful academically, they can ascend to these roles. And I think I don't want that part to be missed. And I think for me, that's one of the responsibilities I hold near to my heart when I'm talking about as an African-American male, is that we're showing African-American students that you can go to class, you can go to school and be successful academically, because people fail to realize we both have master's degrees. Mm-hmm. We went through school and got it done academically to put ourselves in position to be in these roles. And so that in itself, for me, for all athletics, is important for our students to understand that you could go to school, do what you need to do in the classroom, compete in the classroom. Like Todd said, we are competitors. So we compete at everything. It's not just on those athletic fields, it's in the classroom too. This shows them you can do those things and be successful. So that's what's important for me on this whole, as far as responsibility as an African-American in this role.
Absolutely. And when you think about, when you say 20 years ago, as an example, and you would hear the cliche, well, you can be anything you want to be. You can be president of the United States. Then all of a sudden you have President Obama. So now it's not so far-fetched, and when you see women in sports, I'm sure, back in the day, you would tell a young lady, well, you could be whatever. Well, I have daughters. And so now that they see the emergence of women in so many different capacities, it's not so far-fetched. So now with us, as Reggie mentioned, with us in these roles, it's not so far-fetched. Now, I probably will have a tendency to be even harder on those kids, because when you want to really bring out the potential in them as well and not ever sell themselves short. So, but we're living, breathing examples of what they've gone through and where, they can go and to expose them to so much more perhaps than they've ever been exposed to. And I think that's the exciting part about it too, because Bakersfield gets such a rap, and I'm sure any place for that matter, if you've never ventured out past a particular area, you really don't know what's out there. And so now we're going to push them out there. So if they do, leave and then have the opportunity to come back, now they're coming back with even more experience to continue to pass that vision to younger generations, now ultimately to make this community even better.
Yeah, and here in 2020, we're seeing a lot of social change and stuff that across the board, many things that people have waited to see happen. And of course, it's slowly but surely happening, but that's why I found your guys' story of just both getting hired within this year when we're on this precipice of this huge change across our country. I do want to know, though, for you guys, just the fact that you kind of get to do this journey together. And I know for both of you, again, I know it's the job, and you that was the goal all along, is to make it to that job. You weren't thinking about it in terms of being the first one, But the fact, though, that you guys get to kind of do this together and make this change in history together, how cool is that for the two of you?
Well, it's special, you know, and I'm hoping we're the first of many. And that's how I look at it. So when a lot of people say you're the first, it's like, well, I'm just saying I'm the first of many. And it is special. You know, like I said, me and Todd come from similar backgrounds. And so when you can get to this point and lead programs of this magnitude in a positive direction, in a new direction, it is special because we're going to lean on each other. We, like Todd said earlier, we understand each other's experiences because we've gone through them. So who better else to have somebody to talk to about what you're dealing with and the pressure that comes with these two positions than to somebody else who's been through them, you know? And that's the one thing that's great about athletics is that athletics is such an adverse situation. You learn a lot about individuals. You learn a lot about working with people from different backgrounds and race. And to me, athletics is probably the purest form of social equality that you can get because you get a group together, you work for a common goal, and you work hard at it, and then you're successful, and then you celebrate it together. So, you know, everything we accomplish in this, you know, moving forward, we're gonna do this together. So, I mean, it's special for me from that aspect.
And I agree because, you know, deep down inside too, for me, I want somebody to hold me accountable. I want someone to, you know, to light a fire under me because oftentimes I don't ever want to get complacent. Criticism, constructive criticism and criticism in general, sometimes is very difficult to handle. But I know with Reg, you know, and just some of the conversations that we've had, it's with the student athlete's best interest at heart. And so I appreciate that. And so I'd rather take a jab to do it right than to have an arm around me to do it wrong, you know? And so, so I think in that sense, it is going to be cool because to some degree, we are going to be going through some firsts together. You know, the good thing is that neither of us are naive to the positions we have. We've obviously been around and studied and watched all the people in the position before us. So, and our experience is going to help. However, we're going to do things together and separately just based on our personality as well. And so that's where I think is so cool because we can lean on each other and behind the scenes, shoot, I might end up crying on this, you know, but that's kind of the relationship though, too, again, because I am so mindful of, you know, really whomever's in that seat, you know, in the athletic director's seat, I'm going to do it, but it makes it even more so in this sense that again, it's not any extra pressure. It's just like, man, I got to be even sharper, you know,
Right.
I got to be even more detailed. Because ultimately still there are going to be some people out there that want to see you fail.
Mm-hmm.
And not that they're the driving force by any means, but I'm still aware of that in how I conduct myself. And I'm not doing anything different than what we would be asking our student athletes to do. So I'm okay with that. You know, I don't mind being an example. And I know, again, with Reggie, with us working together, well, I started to say rolling together, which is, you know, but I can just say those things.
Right.
That
Right.
you know, certain things are just so natural. So it's cool, you know. So.
It's very true. Very true.
Well, another question, which this is a little bit of a deeper question, but, you know, with everything that's happening here in 2020, you two both as African-American men, I'm sure you've had many experiences of what it's like to grow up, not only in this country, but grow up, you know, on this side of the nation and everything else that's come with that. But do you feel that things are changing? Not only with, you know, the hiring of you two may have been coincidence with all this stuff happening, but do you feel like the world is finally making that shift towards kind of accepting everybody?
I honestly think the mindset of the world is changing. I think what's happened in the last couple of months, people are now, you know, I use the analogy of, I think for a long time, people were like fans, you know, and Todd can relate to this. They're fans. When you're great, they will cheer. But when you're bad, they'll tell you you're bad. And so I think when we look at what's happening here, we have had a lot of people watching it and not just responding to it. But I think now those fans are actually becoming players and they're getting in the game and they're they're just as upset as we are about the social injustice and all the issues that we're facing in our country. And again, I applaud the youth. And when you think about the civil rights movement, that was driven by the youth. And our youth are fired up about change right now. And I think because of that, things will change because they will demand change from people in certain positions moving forward. So I think there's definitely a change in mindset. I think a lot more people are getting involved and speaking their mind about it. And I think people are becoming more aware that there were a lot of social injustice against African Americans, and they want something done about it. And they're standing up saying, no, it's time to change because this is not okay. And we should all be treated under one race, which is the human race. And we have to learn how to do what's right, no matter who has injustice done against them. So I'm excited about that, to see it happening.
And the cool thing, we're a part of it now.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, because we're going to be speaking from experience, not something we heard, not something someone told us. And I think kids are genuine that way. And they, as they say, they can feel you on that. And so I think that's where we'll continue to educate them as well. And now they're going to be the driving force, as Reggie said, moving forward. So I think oftentimes we underestimate this generation and the generation thereafter. But man, there's some powerful young people. And now I think they're starting to express themselves and not be afraid of the consequences either. And I think if they're consistent and they stick together, they can do a lot of good things. And so now you start to get out that old mindset, so to speak, and you'll see it happening, you know, kind of all over. Because kids, what I've learned too over the years, they want discipline, they want structure, they want consistency. Mm-hmm. And if they get that, it's almost like they really don't care who you are, what you look like, what color. I mean, you know, but if you don't do those things, you know, then that's when you're going to be questioned. And now on top of that, with us being African American, we have additional experiences and stories to share that they can relate to, you know, and I think that's where you're going to see a big time movement moving forward.
Yeah, and my last question on this topic is, what would be your message to everyone who may not, you know, understand the gravity of what's happening across the world and the gravity too, with the hiring of you two to just be, again, at the precipice of this change? What would be your message to people that, you know, might not understand the weight of what is the shift that's happening right now?
Mine would be embrace it. Embrace it. Don't accept it in for what it is. Because change is good. And I know that's one of the difficult things about people is that change is difficult when people get used to norm, right? It's just like with the COVID situation. We all got in the habit of what we usually do. The COVID situation made us change our norm. I think what's happened with the social injustice in this country, in the movement and where we're going right now, it's becoming a new norm. So embrace the new norm and change, and we gonna all be better for it in the long run. So that would be my message to everybody.
And to add to that, I'd say have an open mind, you know, because oftentimes when you're resistant to change, you got a closed mind. This is how I've always done it. I don't, you know, and I'm thinking, okay, really? So if something happens to you personally, it involves your family, it involves someone close, now what? You're going to have to change and you're going to have to adapt to new things, as Reggie mentioned, but have an open mind because you just never know. And judge us based on those things, not the first day or you don't even know us, and because right. of the color of our skin. Like, so, and it's funny how we'll do that with certain things or certain people, and yet we don't do that across the board. So, but I mean, you know, it's like, hey, I would say, you know, get on board as well, or you're almost going to be outed. Right. And I say an outcast in that sense, because there are other people that are going to get on board. And so you're going to quickly identify yourself if you're not on board. And ultimately, again, I keep going back to it. You're still supporting the student athletes. You know, it's, I mean, you can make it personal, but it's still the student athletes. So don't tell me that you're about young people, but then you never come and support them. I just, right. You know, so.
Yeah. Well, I greatly appreciate both of you and being so open and honest about this. And I think, Reggie, what you said is so true about 2020 is that there's so much, it's kind of like the world stopped and made us think about stuff,
Hmm.
but now it's forcing us to change. Like there is something about that. 2020 is going to be remembered that that was the year that normalcy and complacency went out the door.
Right.
Whether that be with COVID, whether that be with everything that followed with the death of George Floyd. I mean, it's just crazy to think about things are happening for a reason at this time. I just feel it. But I just want to say thank you both so much for talking again extensively with me. But is there anything else you want to add that I didn't ask you?
I would just say this. I think, the message I would send to the community is, like Todd said, let's have a open mindset and a growth and a more of a growth mindset. Because one of the things we talk about, it's ironic that we're doing this and we're in athletic positions is mediocrity does. I mean, it's either you getting better or you getting worse. And so we look at it as we got to get better all the time. So for us, things like this just, I mean, we thrive in these environments because that's what we're all about. You have adverse situations, we got to get better from it. We're going to reevaluate, we got to get better. I would just ask the community and all the student athletes and send a message to the student athletes is come up to the campus, embrace the change. There's a lot of great coaches in our department and all our athletic programs. And we have a very supportive network for students on our campus. So come up and be a renegade because we definitely want you there.
And I got to echo it because, again, when you talk about the athletics director position, it is one of the most prominent positions in the country. And I selfishly, again, I think we have one of the best. And it's such an honor and a privilege to work with him, for him, and just the athletic department as a whole is going to really, really take control and take over, so to speak, the community in such a positive way that if everybody gets on board, man, this could be a national exposure, I guess, in such a positive way. And because if you really want to be, looked at that way, it's like, man, we have such a great opportunity to do that. So we want to include everyone, and we'll take your criticism as long as you're coming to support.
That's right.
So at
Go
least you're doing
Gays.
that.
Go
Yeah,
Gays.
so it's all good. So we're ready to rock and roll.
Yeah, no doubt.